Okay, so welcome to memory, the second type of forgetting. This is retrieval failure. These are the things you're going to need to understand. Retrieval failure theory, and two types of them: context-dependent forgetting and state-dependent forgetting. All A01. Okay, retrieval failure theory. Many people forget information due to insufficient cues. Cues, and this is a key term you need to understand the word cues, are stored at the same time as the information being stored. If the cues are not available at the time of recall, it may appear that they have been forgotten. Actually, this is due to retrieval failure, not being able to access memories that are actually there. Now, the idea of a retrieval cue, to give it some context for you, is when a smell or a noise or something that somebody else says or a word or something that you look at then leads on to you remembering lots more things. Okay, that's what those cues are. We remember the cues at the same time as actually, putting things to our long-term memory. So we actually need them, in theory, to bring them back, right? And you will experience this all the time, different types, when something you remember that you haven't for a while. The idea of tip of the tongue phenomenon, okay, is where you know it's in your head, it's very frustrating. You know that as soon as somebody gives you the first word or a clue or a cue, you'll get it, but for that time period you just can't retrieve it back from your long-term memory. Encoding specificity principle, Tolving, 1983. If a cue is to help us recall information, it has to present during encoding and at retrieval. So it's just saying that that cue has to be there when we were encoding it, so when we were remembering it, and then it also has to be present when we're retrieving it. Okay, if this pattern is disrupted, then some information may be forgotten. Cues are often encoded, but not in a meaningful way. Two examples of coding. So you're going to get these two different ways in which we can. You just need to understand them. They are key terms: context dependent and state dependent. There's an experiment for each. I'm just going to talk to you about, and that's all you need to know. Okay, first one, context dependent. Now you may have heard context in cognitive interview. So we do context reinstatement in cognitive interview, and this is the reason why. This is why context reinstatement has come about. Godden and Baddeley, this is their experiment, so you need to know this. Deep sea divers were underwater, okay, and we're saying that this is real life. That comes later in the A03, that this is quite a real life study, and there's also quite a few lab studies done at the same times. Divers learned a list of words either underwater or on land, and then were asked to recall the words either underwater or on land. The best way to show this is the next text, the next slide. Okay, so you could be in one of four groups here, and that's where you need to think about it. They're independent of each other. So if you're in group one, learn on land, recall on land, then you can't do any of the other dependent conditions. Okay, all they had was a word list, any word list like we've used in class, 20 words, 30 words, whatever it is, and they're just asked, you've got 3 minutes to remember as many of these words as possible. Okay, and then the same as any other normal simple experiment, they're then asked later on to recall those 20, 30 words. But the difference, the independent variable here, is whether they're in the same context. So if I learnt on land and I recall on land, then in theory I should be better. If I learn on land, the second one, and recall underwater, then the theory would state that we wouldn't be as good because we're not in the same context. Learn underwater, recall on land should be that we recall less because our context is different, and group 4 there, learn underwater, recall underwater, should be stronger. They should get more right because they're in the same context. Two of these conditions, the context of learning and recall, are matched. Accurate recall was 40% lower in the non-matching conditions, and that's a key term to get. So where you were recalling somewhere different to where you learn, 40% lower. The cues of retrieval were different and therefore led to retrieval failure. Okay, second one, state-dependent forgetting. State here, you can see very quickly, is going to be your state of mind, what state you were in. You know, you're all way too young to drink, and I know none of you have touched a single bit of alcohol. But if you were to, you might only remember something when you were drunk as you were last night, kind of thing. And that's this idea. So Carter and Cassidy, 1998, gave antihistamine drugs, hay fever drugs, to participants. They had a slight sedative effect. Now, I don't know if some of you have hay fever. You can get those ones. The ones that really do work actually do make you quite sleepy and drowsy. So they're giving them these drugs. So they're in a slightly different state. All right. This creates an internal physiological state different to the normal state. And then the same thing, participants had to learn lists of words, again in 4 conditions. Learn on drug, recall on drug, learn on drug, recall not on drug, learn not on drug, recall on drug, blah, blah. It should make sense to you. You either do it and recall it in the same place, or you do it somewhere else and recall in a different place, in the same place again. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. This is about the state. In the conditions where there was a mismatch between internal state and learning and recall, the participants performed worse. So again, we're proving that if you're not trying to recall in the same state you were in, when cues are absent, drowsy recall, learn is there is more forgetting, then you can't do it. This has led to us in previous years to, you know, we might take you to the hall, which would be, so we might try and get you to learn in the hall where you're going to sit your exams. So that would be context dependent. And then maybe when you're back in the hall a week later, you're like, okay, I remember blah, blah, blah. And also state, we're hoping that you're in the same state, that you're not turning up, you know, you're not doing this in an unfortunate state. Okay, next lesson, A03, on those studies. So that's what